Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boys Jack and Dave here, giving a reaction to the Harry Kane news that has been broken by Gary Jacob of the Times, as well as Alistair Gold, giving his response and follow up to it. We're going to give our thoughts, see if, our maybe original sort of feelings on Harry Kane have changed at all, as well as maybe discussing, too, the potential absence of him and how that could really be felt throughout the season, and also as well what could convince Harry Kane to stay. We're also going to be discussing Højbjerg. He's been linked to a move away to Atletico Madrid, and that really isn't going away. It looks like Mateo Moretto is breaking some news on that, as well as Sammy Mockbell of the Daily Mail. And so we're going to talk about how maybe the absence of Højbjerg could be felt. Or before we get into it, though, do smash that like button, please. Leave a comment down below as well of maybe how you feel about any of these players, whether you think one of them does need to go and whether Spurs should cash in, or whether you're kind of on our page about how Spurs should probably do whatever it takes to keep them here at Spurs. But let's first start with Harry Kane, Dave. I feel like an article has been broken first, I believe, by Gary Jacob of the Times, and it simply came out saying that Harry Kane will not sign a new contract with Tottenham Hotspur and would be keen to a move to Bayern Munich if a deal can be agreed. And then Alistair Gold kind of followed up basically by saying that it's not exactly the case that he's come out and told Spurs that, I'm not signing a contract. He's basically sort of made it somewhat clear that he is basically open to a variety of different options, whether that be, signing a contract now to sort of, commit his future, could be signing a contract later, after the transfer window actually ends this summer. It could be also just, agreeing a deal with Bayern Munich now and leaving. And a lot of that, depending on whatever avenue he goes down, seems to be dependent on what sort of transfer business happens this summer, and as well as, how Ange Postecoglou is able to kind of convince him, I think, with the transfer business that's been done. Dave, any kind of new revelations that, maybe you have on this situation? And did I kind of summarize that maybe correctly for the people here that, maybe need to know any developments on this Harry Kane situation?
Yeah, look, first, Jack, I think, Gary Jacobs' headline is sensationalist. I mean, I would more than likely, it's sensationalist on a slow news day, right? It's easy to do that, get the clicks and the likes and everything else.
Yeah, look at
Look,
that
when you
photo.
go to Ali Gold's, that's the one I'm more inclined to sort of believe is Ali Gold. And basically, he's saying there's three things at play, Harry Kane, he's basically starting off by saying Harry Kane will not sign a contract this summer, but there's three things at play. He can either leave on a free in the summer, he can either, move this summer, or the option is still there to be convinced by the Tottenham summer transfer business and Ange Postecoglou's sort of setup and everything else, and he could still sign a new contract. So for me, no new revelations, Jack. And what I would say is that my optics on it, or what I've always suggested against the current narrative out there about selling, which I've always said it should actually be about what can Tottenham do to keep their star player, Harry Kane. Looks like my optics more, that's the way we should be looking at it from now on, because it's not done like many people are saying. Ali Gold has left the window open. I'm more inclined to believe him because of who he is and the information that he gets. Now, look, Jack, when you actually look at it, right, when you look at the whole situation, Bayern Munich have put, rumor put in a bid of about 80 million before, right? And Spurs knocked it back. Now, me, I don't know. I don't believe they're going to go up to about 120, 130 million.
Yeah.
I don't believe they're going to do that. I think they're going to back themselves to maybe wait and get this guy on a free, especially with the noise that their chairman was making, that guy Huliles or whatever you want to call him, all that noise they're making. I think they're confident that if Harry Kane doesn't sign or Daniel Levy doesn't accept what their highest bid is, that they'll get this guy next summer for free. But Alistair Gold, where reputable journalists from the Spurs side have come out and said, well, hang on, that's not necessarily the case. So it leaves us in a situation, right, that Daniel Levy either accepts the 80 million and moves on, because Bayern Munich are not going to go too much higher than that, even if they come back with 100 million, which would be like, Daniel Levy has a decision to make, because if not, if he doesn't want to accept that bid, he has to go and do the business this summer transfer window, i.e. centre-backs and maybe one or two other positions to strengthen it in other areas, to convince Kane that this squad is ready to compete on all trophies. And if he's not going to do that, then he's going to lose him for free. But for me, I think we're going to take the risk. I don't think we're going to accept the bid. I think we will look to take the risk to get Harry Kane to sign a new contract. But that presents a huge risk, right? There's no guarantee that that's going to happen, because we'll get onto it a bit later, but there's loads of different variables that if they don't all sort of come together, it's going to be a very, very tricky campaign. So it comes down to, does Daniel Levy accept Bayern's bid, whatever the next bid may be, or does he take the risk, Jack?
It's kind of dependent on what sort of Daniel Levy has said in the past and whether he can kind of commit to his word. I think he's made it quite clear how much he loves Harry Kane and how much he will pretty much do anything it takes to keep Harry Kane around. And maybe that does mean it's going to involve bringing in some other players that can convince Harry Kane to stay. And that's probably something that's always been a bit harder for Levy to accept, maybe, is that he can probably bring in a player or two to try to convince Kane, and he can bring in a big, sort of name manager to try to convince Harry Kane to stay. But he hasn't exactly always done practically enough, you could say. He hasn't gone over, and beyond or above and beyond to try to convince him to stay. And that's what maybe is going to need to happen this summer, because it needs the defense needs a major sort of overhaul. You have plenty of players that I think need to go as well as need to come in. It's not just, I think, bringing in Tapsoba and maybe some other sort of talented center back that's going to convince Kane. I imagine it's going to be offloading the likes of Davinson Sanchez, offloading Eric Dyer, and offloading other players too that could convince Harry Kane to go. Because, I mean, the way he looked after conceding 60 plus goals last season, some of the interviews that he gave to after the Newcastle game, after the Liverpool game, he really did look like a defeated man and did look like he was sort of done with the majority of this team and done with the majority of these players in that back line that were contributing to those goals conceded. And if he doesn't see major change back there, that's going to have to come out of Daniel Levy's pocket. I'm afraid he's probably going to hopefully tell Daniel Levy then that he's going to have to go. Where I'm a bit worried is that, let's say Daniel Levy doesn't do enough to convince Harry Kane to sign a new contract before this transfer window ends. That is then sort of dependent on Postecoglou, feels like, getting the results, and Postecoglou, getting, some good wins under his belt. Even if he did bring in, let's say, a Tapsoba, but didn't bring in, let's say, other players that were probably needed to sort of really convince Kane that we really mean business. And then that sort of means it's going to require Postecoglou to maybe outperform or sort of kind of really, outdo expectations. And then that could convince Kane, oh, well, maybe we could win a trophy, under this guy, despite there maybe not being the full resources to him for Postecoglou to win. So I don't know. I feel like Kane, I hope at some stage, can give us some sort of clarity about his future date. But for me, what I am a little bit worried about is just that, does Daniel Levy take that gamble like you were sort of talking about, like after the transfer window ends? Does Daniel Levy take the gamble to still try to convince him to sign a contract after the summer window ends?
See, the thing is, right, it's sort of like, for me, I don't see Bayern more or less stumping up maybe the 100, 120 million if they do, up until towards the end of the window. And by then, for me, and I think for the club and for Postecoglou, I think it's too late to make that decision. So, I think we're going to end up taking that risk anyway. Plus, we know Daniel Levy loves Champions League. He loves that revenue. Now, look, it doesn't take a genius to work out that, Tottenham have more chance of getting Champions League with Harry Kane up front than they do without him. And I think they might take that risk in the hope that even if he does leave on a free, he'll fire us back to Champions League and get us that sort of revenue. That's what I feel like the club are going to do. I'm not saying it's right. And look, it's an absolute huge risk, and massive, massive risk, because there's no guarantee it's going to happen. There's a lot of, like I keep saying, there's a lot of variables that we're going to touch on that have to come, all together for this to work, for us to be able to get back to the Premier League. But if you're Daniel Levy, you're going to hedge your bets with Harry Kane and the team, because I think since Harry Kane stepped in as striker, I think Tottenham have only been out of the Champions League for 3 seasons. Every other season they've been in it. So I think they will take that gamble, because, if they don't, if they do sell Harry Kane, it's going to take us a few years to get back into Champions League. Now, I hear some arguments, and I get them, where some people say, look, maybe that's just what we need, that we need to store steady the ship, this, that, and the other. However, I don't think that's what the club is going to do. So, look, I think we're going to inevitably going to take that risk, and it's down to Daniel Levy now to go and do that business. I firmly believe he's been trying to do it the last few sort of transfer windows, but me and you have made arguments that, contrary to the recruitment before under someone like Steve Hitchen, it has changed. We are getting better players in here. And look, the West Ham game, it's sort of a double-edged sword for Harry Kane if you're Harry Kane, right? Because he's always stated he wants to win trophies at Tottenham, and that's what us fans want. but he also knows the importance of having a good back line, because that back line, it'll undo all these work that he does up at the other end. And until that changes, we're never going to be in a position for him to even be able to challenge for a trophy, because even if we go on a cup run, once you come up against the bigger teams where they're tight games, they're going to undo you. And the other day, West Ham had 4 shots, score 3, and we still lost the game. So when you're Harry Kane, and everybody will know this inside the football club, the only thing that's actually changed is the style of play. But winning is what matters, and winning is what matters to Harry Kane. If we want to win with a decent style of play, which is what Tottenham has always been about, you've got to bring in that back line. So it's over to Daniel Levy now. If you're going to take that gamble, you do everything in your power now to strengthen that defense, but also 1 or 2 other areas, so that when Harry Kane looks around and sees, do you know what? The club have completely refreshed this squad. Pre-season has gone well. We're playing great football. The back line is coming together nicely. We start off the season well. Things can change very, very quickly in football. And you've got to understand, we've got no Europe next year, so we've got 1 game a week. So that's all we have to concentrate. Put out your best 11 like Arsenal did last year. Who knows where it might take you? I'm not going to say we're going to win a Premier League, but we might have a better season than what many people would maybe anticipate. But look, Jack, at the end of the day as well, until Bayern Munich stump up the money Tottenham want, there is no decision to be made. So until they stump up that money, this talk of selling them is nonsense. When Bayern stump up that money, if they do, that's when you have that conversation. But right now, the conversation should be, while that window is still open, get the business you can do in to convince Harry Kane to stay. Until then, that's what the conversation should be and should only be.
If he wants to keep Harry Kane, that's going to require more ambition for Daniel Levy. It's going to require investing more. It's going to require spending more out of his own pocket. And if that's what he's prepared to do, then that's what he's prepared to do. But he's not going to be able to get both things. He's not going to be able to get what he really wants, which is not to spend all that much money and keep Harry Kane and just sign him to a big bumper new contract. He's going to have to sign him to a big bumper new contract and invest a lot out of his own pocket and out of his own Spurs resources to get in the players that will convince then Harry Kane to stay. And that requires a type of ambition that he hasn't had before. So we'll see what he goes for. We'll see what he tries. And I think there probably needs to be some sort of deadline. I spoke about this earlier with Mia from Spurs Between the Lines. Shout out Mia. She and I sort of said at some stage too, there needs to be a deadline established between Harry Kane as well as the club about whether they've convinced him enough to kind of sign that contract. And that can be a week or 2, maybe before even the window ends. Like, have we done the business to, make you consider more about signing this deal, Harry? And if he leaves, the meeting still unconvinced, then they can probably go back to Bayern, Real Madrid, and others and say, yeah, we're now more prepared to listen to some of these bids. And even if they end up being underneath what we really want, I guess we'll just have to, take the damage and, fight, whatever we can, to get the most out of the deal and try to see what we can do about it. But I'd be very worried to see Kane go in that scenario. But should we move on to a certain other absence of a player, Dave, Højbjerg, or do you have another point on Harry Kane? Yeah.
I just got one more quick point and then we'll move on. Because a lot of people are going to take what they want from this article, or they're going to buy into Gary Jacobs' sensationalist headline. Right. The important thing is that Ali Gold, but not only Ali Gold, also George Bannister, I've seen on Twitter, have come out where people have said, oh, Harry Kane doesn't want to sell him. And, I've seen George Bannister going on there comments as well, who's a very sort of respected ITK in amongst circles, saying, hang on, that's not the case. That is not what's being said here. There is still an opportunity for Tottenham to convince Harry Kane to sign a new contract. So hopefully that's what we do. So let's not get this headline misconstrued that all of a sudden Harry Kane wants out. That is not what it's saying. In fact, it's saying what I've said all along. What can Tottenham do to convince Harry Kane that this project is the one? This is the one he needs to sign on for. So Levy, go and do the business. And I'd also say that, we can sit here and blame Harry Kane, but the club could have done some business in certain areas earlier, and that might have actually persuaded him to sign on the dotted line this summer. Because I would argue once this pre-season tour ends, it's too late to sell Kane and bring in other players and ask Postecoglou to come up with different systems with the Premier League right around the corner. So, look, let's wait and see what happens. Just an
absolutely right. Absolutely right. Let's get into another potential absence, for this upcoming season, and that could be Højbjerg. And it's moved I would say I don't know if it's been moving quickly, but I feel like the news just hasn't gone away with his connection to a move to Atletico Madrid. And Sammy Mockbell has said after positive contacts with Atletico, the expectation is Højbjerg is likely to make the switch from Spurs to Atletico Madrid in the coming weeks. Douglas Luiz and Conor Gallagher are viewed as potential replacements. I think we were linked to a young Spanish kid named Gabri Viega as well, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really too aware of him or know much about him. Just tried my best with the pronunciation there. But also a Spanish journalist, Mateo Moreto, has also come out and sort of said that Atletico Madrid basically have identified Højbjerg as sort of their top midfield target for the summer, and they see him as the ideal candidate for what they're trying to do over with Diego Simeone. So it looks like, they're not going to go away. They're going to try very hard to try to bring in Højbjerg, and Højbjerg maybe is keen, or I wouldn't know if he's keen. He's open to it. He doesn't seem to be coming out and rejecting this type of interest, because I imagine this type of club offers Champions League on a consistent basis, and as well as just a different move for him, and he could, try a different experience. But Dave, you feel like, and I'll start with you, because as much as I'm a huge Højbjerg love and, have my Højbjerg, fan card, like every loyal paying Højbjerg fan member does of Ellie's Army,
It's not cheap.
I feel like Højbjerg, Dave, maybe now is the best time to sell him, if you even were to sell him, because of all the players we have in midfield and all the various options we have. But I feel like you're maybe a bit against the grain, or you're against what most people feel like, that it's actually not a good time to sell Højbjerg right now.
Look, I think financially, from a financial aesthetic, right? After this season, Højbjerg's value probably starts to decrease. So if you're looking at gaining the max for him now, you probably sell him. However, Jack, I get everything is positive under Ange Postecoglou, right? But this is where it becomes dangerous. Like, why are we so quick just to say, oh yeah, cash in, that'll do, sell him? What we've got to understand is that, we're saying that based off that every one of them options that we currently have hit the ground running and they're staying here and that they're going to be committed to Tottenham. But we don't have that assurances. We haven't seen Dembele, so we don't know what he's going to be like. As much as people want him to be good and as much as we want him to be given a chance, you still don't know. The variable is there, and the odds have been stacked one way for so long. So it's a huge gamble to say that this guy is going to be that guy to step in there. You look at Lo Celso, there's been a lot of links around his future this summer, more than there has been a lot of other players in that position, I'd argue. But also, I get you had a good 45 minutes the other day, but there's no. Like, I've seen 45 minutes from Lo Celso and the Spurs jersey before. It's consistency. And there's no guarantee he's going to offer us that, Jack. You have to have more of a bite-sized sample. Then you also got to remember, Bentancur, we were told, won't be back till about October. And if we're going off the long injury he's had, it's probably going to be November, December before he really hits his stride running. So, that leaves you then with Basuma, who we're all expecting to have a really good campaign. Brilliant. Sure. But even Skip, Skip, he's not as good as Højbjerg. Højbjerg's game all around is much better than him on the ball defensively. It's so much better than Ollie Skips. And then Sarr, there was sort of links with maybe him being moved out. So you're leaving yourself short on a lot of numbers. And I think it's a gamble. And with us going into the season, Jack, with a new manager, new brand of football, that if we don't do the business that we're hoping the club do at centre-back, and let's get this straight. We can't sit here and say 100% it's going to be happening. And everyone can sit here and goes, oh, it's obvious Daniel Levy has to do it. Look, I've been screaming about it for 3 years now. I thought it was obvious after Jose Mourinho, it wasn't. I thought it was obvious after Nuno, it wasn't. I thought it was obvious after Conte, it wasn't. I thought it'd be obvious going into this summer. That's one of the first bits of business you do. And we still haven't done it. And I feel the club are going to give some of them guys another chance. So you're back in a position there where no matter what you do going forward, no matter how well you play, your backline's always going to cost you. That will then bring pressure on the club, on Ange Postecoglou. And then if that happens, what you want is your old, reliable, well, not your old, reliable players, but players that are steady Eddies, that are reliable. And Højbjerg is that guy, always ready to be called upon, never injured, always gives his all. And I just think we're getting ahead of ourselves by going 30 million, yes. And that's off the assumption that other players that have not shown it in a Tottenham jersey are going to perform. And I think it's a huge gamble. You've also got to remember Vicario on goals. What if that doesn't work out? You need someone like Højbjerg then in that midfield to stop the amount of goals on your shot or the amount of shots on your goal. you know? And it's the same with the Kane situation, Jack, you know? There's too many unvariables to be letting someone like Kane and Højbjerg go. For me, if this conversation was a year down the line and I had proof that we had a solid back line, the goalkeeper was settled in nicely, we had a good thing going in midfield, I feel more comfortable to have these conversations, but also more comfortable to let these guys go because you've got a solid sort of base to go off. You've got solid evidence to go off to say, okay, we've got a solid foundation now. Now we can look at starting, you know, okay, we can cash in on Højbjerg. Right now, okay, give us 100 million, you can take Kane. But until we have that, we're taking a huge, huge gamble, saying, yes, just get rid of Kane. Yes, just cash in on Højbjerg.
Yeah, I feel like I'm sort of in this position where I am sort of relying or expecting that Ndombele or Lo Celso does sort of come good. My selling of Højbjerg or my thinking and or considering of selling of Højbjerg does sort of hinge on Ndombele, you know, coming, you know, doing quite well. Bentancur coming back nice and early. Papa Matasar not being loaned out, like you mentioned. And I'm sort of feel like it's also stems on kind of Skip feels like he's being forced to stay, like, or he just seems to be really well loved and cherished at the club for the time being. And I don't see his future really being, you know, pointed, you know, out the door. And so it does feel like we're kind of being, whether we think he's actually good enough for the future or not, at least for the time being, he is being kept around. And then you sort of think to yourself, what position is Skip going to be playing? Is he going to be operating more as a number 6? Is he going to operate more as a number 8? I don't think he's really going to do great at really either, if you ask me. I think he needs to have someone next to him in order to really, you know, kind of get his best attributes. But what he really truly needs is actually just a loan move away, I think, just to sort of develop himself and be able to sort of learn, you know, maybe other elements of his game. Højbjerg, that absence will be felt if, you know, some of those things don't go well. And also, too, like maybe compared to Skip, Højbjerg, I feel like is a bit more adaptable than Skippy is. Højbjerg could technically fill in that number 6 role. He could fill in the number 8 role, maybe is a bit more advanced. He's a good box-to-box midfielder. He's shown that he could do that for Denmark, and he's shown that he can do that for Spurs and grabbing goals and assists as well. So I do feel like there is that you are missing a lot, and there is a huge absence. And, you know, if I do want to sell him, which I feel like I'd consider it for something a bit over around, I wouldn't know if 30 million is what I would take, but I think around 35 plus is probably, you know, then I start to consider it. I think it does hinge on Ndombele and those guys performing well. It's absolutely true. And Papa Matasar being kept around, and James Madison performing well, and a bunch of other players, you know, kind of doing their job. And that's not given. And the track record would show that that's probably not going to happen. And you're absolutely right about that, Dave. And I think that's a fair argument when it comes to keeping around the main man Højbjerg. And hopefully Ellie, you know, approves of your defense.
I'm sure Ellie will. I'm sure Stats should be using that left, right, and centre now, Jacob. But look, you know, we also got to understand, right? I know people say, but Dave, it's a project on the ranch, this, that, and the other, right? And I get it. But why do we have to weaken the project and make it harder to do? You know, keeping these guys around, if we can, Harry Kane and Højbjerg, it gives the manager people that he knows he can rely on to perform. Now, when it comes to Ollie Skip, that's when you're going to feel the absence of Højbjerg. I get the hype around Ollie Skip, right? I get that he's going to be kept around because he's homegrown, and, you know, he throughout the ages, he has shown ability, and I get that. However, what he's missing is that maturity to the game, which I keep speaking about with these youngsters when they're on pre-season tour. And people then label at Højbjerg, oh, but he can't pass. We need someone that's better at passing. Okay, I get it. But Højbjerg's better than Skip at passing. That was evident in that pre-season friendly, right? And that's why I'm not going to get too hyped up off if Ndombele or Lo Celso do well in pre-season, because we've got to understand, it's not about getting in there, pressing people, harrying people, tackling people. It's about shape. It's about minutes in the leg, fitness, you know, this, that, and the other. So my argument would be you're never going to get more time on the ball in pre-season to affect the game. And Skip didn't do that in the first half against West Ham. I feel he went MIA. But the reason why we looked a lot better in the second half is because all 3 midfielders were at it, including Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. He also mopped up anything that sort of was broke down and came back as well. So for me, you know, if I'm going into the season on an Ange Postecoglou, I get there can be a rebuilding phase. But I look at it 2 ways. First of all, why can't we do that rebuilding phase with insurance policies, like keeping these guys around and making it easier than it needs to be? But also, Why can't we dream like Arsenal did last season? Why can't we go on and do something like that? We have a better chance keeping these guys around because they're also huge leaders, Jack. So I don't want to preempt this, right? And we can all sit here and say, oh, well, we're going to give Ange a chance. But the reality is, you know, come October, November, if we're in a position where we were under Nuno or worse, you know, which could be a real possibility. We don't know unless we bring in centre backs. You know, fans will call for his head. The media will call for his head. You know, you're already seeing it after the West Ham defeat in terms of the media, right? So it's sort of like, if that does happen, you're going to need leaders in the dressing room, people that you can fall back on, and they're going to be your guys. So I just think these conversations for me are premature, and I'll be much more comfortable having them a year later. I get maybe we're at the point where we don't have that time, but what I'm trying to get across, Jack, is that instead of the immediate reaction and always about, yep, that's enough money, yep, that's enough money, because we are in a world where everything has a price tag, we've also got to try and be smart and look beyond and take. I get everything's positive. We've got to see things through a bit more of a, you know, a balanced lens on things and take them variables into account and look at the insurance policies in the dressing room and say, do you know what, on this one, Tottenham might have to take that gamble.
Everybody hit that like button, please, on the way out. Please leave a comment down below if you feel like there's a certain player that you feel like we should be letting go. Which player's absence do you feel like we actually might be feeling maybe more than another? Is it Højbjerg's? Is it Kane's? Which player do you feel like you want to cash in on? Let us know in the comments down below. Feel free to grab a membership to support the channel in an extra way, and we will be seeing you. Come on, you Spurs. In the big hands we trust.
In the mighty hands we trust.